Dialogues. My name is Brian Rogoff. I'm the CEO of XCL Education, and we're broadcasting again today from the XCL World Academy in Singapore, and absolutely thrilled to have all of you who are joining us both live in person and live through the internet. So really excited today. We've had a couple fantastic XCL Dialogues. First one in our author series with Tom Wright. The last one we held back in September, which was an amazing group of female entrepreneurs and leaders. And today, I have to say I'm biased. It's one of my personal favorites, and I'm not just saying that because I know our guest speaker, but today we're really thrilled to have Chris Burggraeve joining us as our presenter today. And I've known Chris for about 5 years. He is an amazing person and also one of the best marketeers in the world. He's got he'll tell you a little bit more about his background, but I've had an honor of working with him, having him as an advisor, and I think you're going to find today's topic extremely interesting. So without further ado, let me welcome Chris Burggraeve to the stage.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today in Singapore at the XCL World Academy. I'm going to share with you a point of view. The point of view is going to be why space matters for students and for their parents. I'll be quoting from both professional and private experiences, and I'll also make references back to 50 years ago, to today, and to the future. So sometimes, depending on how old you are, you may recognize those references, or you may not. So again, students and parents, we go on a little time travel. Professionally speaking, the topic of Think and Act Galactic comes from the fact that in my professional life, I try to bring two worlds together, two planets, the planet of marketing and the planet of finance. Those are two different planets that are not speaking, and it's like in the movie Arrival, I try to make them come together. And what I do is to the world of Warren Buffett, which is the icon of the finance world, and on the left side, your left side, you see the picture of Phil Kotler. Phil Kotler is the gentleman who invented marketing. He's the father of marketing. I wrote some books about this marketing and finance world. You see this one, and you see this one. Today we're not going to talk about those books. It's about the cover of the books and the colors and the space component that goes in it. Because in those books, I actually talk about a model. It's models that you may encounter in the university later on, but there's also a mindset in there. Today we're going to talk about that mindset. And the mindset is a galactic mindset. That word galactic is what I want to share with you today in the first place. What you see here is a simple matrix. The brands that you live with, like Apple, like Coca-Cola, they are treated in this matrix somewhere. A brand like Apple says, we think and we act global. If you go to the Apple store here in Singapore on Orchard Road, or you go to New York, that Apple store is about the same. The Apple experience that you have is the same. It's globally thinking and acting global. Coca-Cola, for example, I used to work for Coke for many years. Coca-Cola says we're a global brand, but we act local. The way the brand connects with you is a very local experience. And they may share things across the world, but it's think and act global and local. Today, we're going to go beyond this. For 50 years, brands have been working in this paradigm, in this structure. Today, we're going to say, well, there is a third dimension. There's another dimension. What I'd like you to remember from this is that there is a time now to think and act galactic. And I'll tell you why that is. Now, everybody, including me, I'm a child of my time. I'm born in the 60s. And what you see here in the back is the cartoons I grew up with. Tintin is a well-known cartoon figure worldwide, and his little dog. He's the first Belgian that went on to the moon. So I grew up with this. I had it as a poster in my room, dreaming of one day maybe I can get into space. Now, I didn't become an astronaut, but I started to play with model planes and this and that. Airfix is a brand that may not have been here in Singapore. Every kid would be playing with these model planes at the time. I didn't become an astronaut and work for NASA or ESA. I didn't become a magician. I became a consumer scientist interested in the future. But guess what? In my future, I never ever dreamt of going into space, and yet it may happen. So 10 years ago, I bought a ticket on Virgin Galactic. And for those who know, this is a company that is creating human spaceflight. And the chances are very high that in 2-3 years, I'll actually be in that spaceship and go up. I'll tell you more about it later. But space is going to happen. That little boy Tintin, now I may actually experience it. The iconic picture of 50 years ago, in 1969, man set step on the moon. That iconic picture that you see on your left, that black and white imprint of Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon, has been the defining picture for 50 years. But then, a few years ago, finally, this got replaced. And everybody now knows that other picture, which is the Tesla flying around in space. So finally, something has happened. Something structural has happened. The first period we will talk about, I'll show you a little bit what Space 1.0 looked like and felt like, and how that is important for your daily life, how it has impacted our daily life. The second picture, the Tesla one, has been the start of a second period which we're living now. This 50 years, ladies and gentlemen, will be the most, it will be exponential. That will be the thing I want to tell you. Right before the pandemic, I was in Holland doing a speech, talking to somebody from the Dutch space station, the Dutch space agency, and they said, look, we as astronauts and people working in space, we are doers, we are makers, but we are not storytellers. We don't know, it's time that the story of space gets told and to a broader mass audience. So what I'm trying to do now in my own humble way is try to share a little bit of that story that these guys have been doing. Space starts, let's say, in the 60s, and there were 3 players. There was the NASA that you know in the United States, ESA in Europe, and the Russians were there with a company called Roscosmos. They're still active. It's government money that was funding all this exploration in space. Really, the impetus to go into space was fueled by John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, that famously said, I want to get to the moon. And lo and behold, 6 years after he unfortunately passed away, he was murdered, we got on the moon. Apollo landed in July 1969 on the moon. In 1964, this is the year I was born, there's also a fantastic book written that some of the science or sci-fi nerds here in the room may love, is A Space Oddity. That movie, if you've never seen it, with HAL 2000, was an absolute fantastic vision of the future of what may happen. The gentleman that you see here, Arthur C. Clarke, wrote many books, also could envision the idea of satellites and communication. He was a wizard, he's a UK gentleman, he had a fantastic TV series, and so more and more, you saw these people envisioning what kind of future we might have and what space might do. The most important thing that affects all our lives today is the internet. The internet was born out of space research, actually out of military research. What you see on your left there is DARPANet. DARPANet was in the Cold War in the 50s, 60s, between Russia and the United States. The military created a communication network that ultimately led to the creation of the internet as you know it today. I'll skip this, but if today you are using Waze in your car as a parent, or if you download Strava for your sports, or if you look up anything on Google, you're leveraging satellite technology. Satellite technology is a direct result of space exploration. And right now, satellites are booming around us. It comes from space research, from government-invested space research. But more than that, if you're running on Nike Air shoes, if you have LEDs in anywhere in your home, if you were raised with powder baby milk, if you have carbon bike that you ride on, all of that is derivative technology from space research of the last 50 years. So there's an incredible amount of products and services that we're using in our daily lives today that people don't realize comes from space research. The most important part that in the last 50 years was discovered is not the moon. It's by going to the moon, we actually rediscovered our own planet. What you see here is an iconic picture, one of the first pictures that was taken, that you see that little blue planet. It's called the overview effect. I don't know if you know how many people have gone into space till to date, but there's only 600 people that have gone into space to this date, over 60 years. That's 10 every year. And they all come back and they're touched to the core of their soul by something called the overview effect. It's when you're into space and you look out in the darkness, in that infinite beauty, and you see Earth, and it changes how you look at the Earth. You don't see borders. You don't see division. You see unity. So it apparently does something with your mind, with your soul. It's called the overview effect, and we'll come back to it. That's Space 1.0. Now let me move to Space 2.0. Space 2.0 has started. And Space 2.0 is essentially the time where, on top of more governments, now the entire world is in this game, China, India, Japan, everybody has joined the space race. And on top of tax money from all of us, there is private rock stars, now call them rocket stars, that have pledged billions of dollars in the space race. You know them, you see their pictures. And the vision has changed. What you see there in the corner on the left is the original Apollo picture of 52 years ago that has been supporting everything we did over the last 50 years, from the Earth to Moon. What you see as a new picture that was released 2 years ago, in summer 2019, is from the Moon to Mars. Actually, Elon Musk, you see his little quote there on the bottom, is the biggest exponent of going to Mars, and he was quoted famously as saying, "I would love to die on Mars, just not on impact." So these rocket stars here, whether it's Branson, Musk, Bezos, Milner, Zuckerberg, and there's many more, all this extra money is coming into the game, which creates a turbo on what's going to happen on Main Street. So all this extra money that flows into research and applications is going to have downstream an impact on our lives. On top of that, you have the whole commercial component. So besides government, the commercial part, you see there a logo of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. There is an incredible amount of new companies emerging, starting up, that a number of you may be working for, that are now creating a space industry. How big is that space industry? Very large. It's booming like hell. When you go now online, there's a lot of financial information available and a lot of companies cropping up. In essence, if you speak like an economist, it's going to be, by 2040, it's going to be $1 trillion economy with the best knowledge we have today. If you take all the businesses that have some form of connotation to space, and I think that's going to be an underestimation of what's going to happen. 2 years ago, Virgin Galactic was the first company that was listed on the stock market in New York as the first human spaceflight company. So you can now buy shares in that company that is creating space tourism. Now, not for the faint-hearted, let me tell you, because this is a new industry. Things go up, things come down. This is a nascent new business, so for the parents interested and say, "Oh, that's the next big thing," be careful. Now, let me give you a little side story as to why I bet on Virgin Galactic at the time. First, it was the first opportunity I had in my lifetime. 10 years ago, it was an idea on paper. These rockets, they did not exist. The idea of the rocket existed and everything else, but it was not, you couldn't say this has been cleared for flying. So I bet on it, reserved my ticket, because it was the best chance at that time to, in my lifetime, potentially enjoy the overview effect. The second reason is, don't think of Virgin Galactic and others like Bezos Blue Origin. Don't think of companies like this as just being for rich people. You shoot in space and they come back. That's not what it's about. What it's really about is democratizing space flight and making the world even smaller. What I mean with that? I flew in a few days ago from New York on Singapore Airlines, 18 hours, right? Long flight. If this technology works the way it is intended to, once the tests start to come at scale, you will fly in the coming years from New York to Singapore in an hour and a half. You will fly suborbital. So the world will become smaller, just like if you go back 50 years ago, like when planes were new. It took multiple planes to go from one continent to another. And then it took 2 planes, and then it took 1 plane, and that plane went faster. The fact that you can go with 1 plane from New York to Singapore is extraordinary. But in our lifetime, and the students that are sitting here, I bet you will be going to New York in probably 3-4 hours, and then in 1 hour. The last point is that this same technology will help us go faster in space discovery. In '69, it took 3 weeks to get to the moon. Today, we estimate it will take 3 years to get to Mars, one way. 3 years. But if this technology keeps going, we may be getting to Mars in 3 months. Done in 3 weeks, then in 3 days. I mean, that will take some time. Not in my lifetime, probably. Maybe in some of the people here. So it's all about making the world smaller and bringing the universe closer. That's what this is about. Now, so as I said, yes, you can invest in space. There's trackers for those people more financially inclined. Look up a tracker called UFO. It combines all the publicly available companies, and there's a few more trackers that you can follow. What's more cool is this. Some of you may start to work up there. What you see here is the space station, which actually, as we speak, circles 16 times a day at 27,000 kilometers an hour around us. It's an amazing feat that exists for more than 20 years. You have a thing that is 3 football fields wide, circulating around the Earth and doing a lot of research. The Chinese are now building their own, and there's more coming. Now, imagine that today you can actually go and visit that. It will still cost you a hefty sum, but it's possible to go do it. So more and more, space is becoming closer to us, as opposed to something unimaginable, like the little Tintin that I showed you in the beginning. Some of you may be working here. If you think this is science fiction, this is not science fiction anymore. Bezos is actively launched, this is announced last week. It's called the Orbital Reef. This is an industry park that will be launched in the next 5 years and be built in the sky. You will be able to stay there as well. So again, some of you here, parents or students, may be working on these reefs and on anything else that will be created like that. If you want to go to Mars, this is another company called EBIOS. They're already training in the Mojave Desert. They are recreating what may be the types of colonies that is necessary to live on Mars and simulating what we need to do to survive there as humans. So these things are happening one by one, much more than you think. And coming back to the overview effect, any Star Trek fans in the room? Captain Kirk. So Captain Kirk never was in space, really. We've seen him in space all the time, but he went. 2 weeks ago, he went with Blue Origin. As the oldest person on the planet, he was in space for the first time. And let me read you his words when he came back. Everybody should experience the power of the overview effect. And he added, I hope I never recover from this. And that's powerful. I hope I never recover from this. What he meant is, it's such a mind-changing, soul-changing experience that everybody, he hopes, and I hope too, one day will have a chance to experience this. But then let's go one level further. You're sitting here in the XCL World Academy. We train here, the ambition of the school is to train the leaders of tomorrow and let you ask existential questions. Here's a few existential questions for us, coming up. On the left side, you see the United Nations, the governance of space. There was an outer space treaty that all the countries signed in the late 60s to say, well, how do we manage space? Like, how do we manage water, the oceans? How do we, between countries? What's the informal and formal contract of how to do this? Guess what happened in the last couple of years? Big countries, US, China, etc., all started to have a space force. The military is happening. The militarization of space is starting to happen as a strategic next frontier. Where might that lead to? A bunch of you are playing video games, and those video games may have very cool names called World War III, and we think that's very cool, or we may think that's very cool, but war is not very cool. The question is, will we or will we not down the road have to deal with military conflicts as a result of power grabs in space? These are existential questions that are coming to us that we never have to think about. Another question, completely different, more from my field, the marketing and then here the communication. iSpace is a Japanese company that raised millions to get the rights to have advertising on the moon. They raised real money on this and they're trying to get the rights. Who has the rights to sell off the moon? How would we deal with this? Do we want this? Do you want this? Think about it. Do you want to look up in the sky and look at the stars and all of a sudden you have commercials broadcasted at you? Do we want this? Don't we want this? These are existential and ethical dilemmas that will come up. So while we deal with those, we can eat astronaut food, we can talk to aliens. There's a number of practical things happening. The brands that you know in your daily life, they are getting ready with this. Let me give you some examples. Actually, I interact with 3 of those brands. I worked for Coke, Budweiser, and for Cartamundi, which is the owner of Bicycle, which is the world's leading playing card. Bicycle's playing cards was already testing in 1971 with NASA fireproof playing cards. Why fireproof playing cards? Because when you sit with astronauts in an oxygen-filled room, the fire hazard is very high. So they needed to invent a new safe varnish on it to ensure that it wouldn't burn automatically, for example. Coca-Cola was testing pressurized cans in the mid-80s. And Budweiser is already doing tests on the ISS to see how germination, how barley, etc., works in space. Now, guess what? Astronauts need to play cards. They have time, they need to play cards, they need to drink Coke and have some beer. So pizza needs to be tested too. So mankind does what mankind does. The metaverse, which was just announced by Zuckerberg, you can see that slowly we are getting there. Bicycle is actually used in this picture. You see Zuckerberg and some funky people playing cards in the metaverse, but that's on their way to space. Dunkin' Donuts, you see there another company well known, Dunkin' Donuts. They made some tactical things. You paint the Dunkin' Donut blue and you play on the space theme. It's a nice tactical promotional theme. Brands can get certification from products that are used by NASA or by astronauts to say, I am space grade. You can do that. But all of that is not what I mean when I implore on you, think and act galactic. Think and act galactic is not on a tactical level, it's on a strategic and existential level. The key question that the students of today, and parents, when you have students of today, and then the parents of tomorrow, think about is really what is going to be your moonshot. Will somebody in this room or listening, will they create the next picture that will be iconic and that will be defining what we are as mankind? So what is going to be your moonshot? That's the key question. That's thinking and acting galactic. And from a brand perspective, in the marketing world where I come from, that's the question I'm asking brands. What do you do? And let me show you an example of brands that are going in a direction. Oil of Olay is a brand by Procter Gamble. And this is a Super Bowl ad in the United States, Super Bowl, the American football ad, where they played on a very important theme of gender equality and between men and women. And look at the ad. See how they use the space tactic to bring a bigger question alive. Let us look at this commercial.
Is there enough space in space for women? Who wrote that? Are people really still asking that question?
Operation Make Space for Women is ready for liftoff.
Mission
control.
Taraji P. Henson here.
We have the opposite of a problem.
There is so much space up here.
Well, I could have told you that.
When we make space for women, we make space for everyone. One tweet equals
$1 to girls who code.
What does this button do?
eject.
So in their own fun way, this brand starts to play with the theme, and again, they're starting to think bigger than just saying, "Hey, olive oil is good for your skin and good cream." You try to bring the brand on a higher level, aligning with the zeitgeist of space. But bigger than that, think about the number one issue that we are concerned with today. It's actually going on in Glasgow as we speak, the whole climate change summit. Whether you are the United Nations within the Millennial Goals, whether you are a think tank like Singularity, whether you are, on the left side, a very famous author, and if you read that book and you see what the existential questions that he's asking, or whether you are the World Economic Forum, the guys that organize Davos each year, and you see they do an analysis each year of what are the main questions that people have on their mind, it all boils down to one thing: climate change. Ultimately, that is where we are. So the key question becomes, for every brand that is out there, is what's going to be my contribution to that? How am I going to ensure that the world is going to be surviving this heat? Because if we don't, Stephen Hawking, which is one of the world's most famous astrophysicists, was predicting that this planet as we know it has another 400 years before the heat will self-absorb. So what can space and brands connecting through it, what can we all do to avoid this? That is one of those bigger existential questions that we can ask ourselves. Now, let me turn another way, which is, it's all very nice, that space thing, but what are the downsides? Let me argue the counterpoint. What are the questions that space research needs to ask itself as we pour money in it, as we spend time and attention? What you see here are just two examples, ethical and ecology questions. A question that comes up when I talk to students is, Chris, very nice, but this whole, Virgin Galactic and Jeff Bezos putting people in space and all that, what will that do to the layers, the stratosphere layers around it? What will happen? Are you going to are these space rockets and the satellites ruining what we have around us? It's a good question. Ask them. But they're very well aware of that question and how to solve it, and it has to do with the fuel that is being used, etc. Another question is one of choices. What you see on the right there is a question written by a 16-year-old girl back 2 years ago that says, well, should we invest in space research or should we invest in poverty relief? It's a good question, but when you see the whole thread of her article, which is extremely well written for a 16-year-old, and all the commentary, it is not, ladies and gentlemen, it is not a or question. It's an and question. If you see the positives that space has brought us over the last 50 years, just think of the internet and satellites, etc. They've helped a lot in bringing people in progress to Earth in many ways. If you look at the budget that, say, the United States spends a fraction of its budget only on space research, but a large other component on Medicare and Medicaid and a bunch of other things. So the budgetary question is a nice one, but we should always see it in the correct perspectives. Space and everybody involved in space needs to use the and argument, not necessarily the or argument. You look at economic and rational and emotional elements to say why it is worth investing. You can do both. A second question very often that I get is, well, in this day and age, look at COVID, look at the supply issues around the world. Globalization, isn't that dead? I mean, this is an idea that was well summarized by a book from a New York journalist called Thomas Friedman. The world is flat. Is the world really flat today? Has it ever been? So are we going back to local supply, local this? The world has never been flat. What you see on the right side here is an economic model of a well-known professor as well, Pankaj Jemawat. He called it the cage model. It's all about distance. I'm not going to teach an economics lesson here, but the point is that the world has never been flat. There's always been barriers to go from one place to another, to export goods and services from one place to another. Visible barriers, invisible barriers. It has always been that. And yes, today, again, this is a chart to scare everybody. On the right, you see physical export of goods and services. The physical exports of goods and services is suffering at the moment, particularly. You see those supply chain issues everywhere. Global trade is diminishing a little bit. But globalization is not just physical. It's mental and digital. The number of terabytes that are flying around uninhibited is increasing. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, what is happening, it's not the goods and services, it's your minds. What is going on in what we want and what we don't want. I'm an exponent of the 60s, born there. My father, I was actually born in Africa, but let's say my grandparents lived in Bruges, Belgium, and for them going from Bruges to Brussels to the capital, 100 kilometers further, was a big trip. In their lives, they've been to Spain on holiday maybe a few times. It was very far. I grew up and had a much bigger horizon. My daughter has grown up in the world. My potential grandchildren and her grandchildren, they will live a galactic life. So our horizons and the students that are sitting here, you're not born in an environment where we still are dreaming of going to the moon. We're there, we're done that. We're now into Mars, and there's a bunch of other things, as I showed you, going on. That's part of who you are and how you grew up with. You're gonna have your experiences and your kids' experiences will be much further in the universe. Here's an example we asked some people, say, do you believe in life outside? And here you see a statistic that is a fairly large amount of people starts to believing that there is life outside Earth, an intelligent life outside Earth. I mean, if you look purely statistically, depending on your religious belief, but purely statistically, there has to be intelligent life somewhere, and more people start believing that. And if people believe that, they will be looking for it. So that will be also a driver of why we go and keep exploring. So in a nutshell, to summarize, my plea to all of you here in the room and listening is, ladies and gentlemen, the galactic age has started. Build your future in that galactic age. And if you were to ask me, and then what? A next topic we can discuss after this is the cyborg age, whether we as humans will change into some form of hybrid between half robot, half human, but that's the subject of another topic. In the meantime, what I wanted to do is thank you all for listening, and I wish sincerely that all of you here, one day in your life, will be able to experience the overview effect. Thank you so much. Please come on down and ask a question. Hello. What's your name? Emma? Hi, Emma.
The question is that you said there's 600 people that went to space. Are you one of those, right?
No, I will be. I'll probably be number... I have a seat, so I hope that in the next 2-3 years I will go and probably be number, I don't know, somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200. So still nice, right, to be...
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Sir.
I am not a student. My name is Glenn.
We are all students of life, right?
Thanks for being with us. Interesting presentation.
From a marketer's point of view, we saw the oil of Olay commercial, for example. COP26 have agreed that they don't want to raise the global temperature more than a little over a degree by 2030. Scientists are saying it could be more like 3 degrees if things go badly. Products like oil of Olay, let's be honest, are not essential for the survival of Earth. They create waste, they create plastics, they use resources, just like a McDonald's Happy Meal creates those little toys that end up in a landfill somewhere. When do you think, as a marketer, that organizations, that multinationals will come together and realize maybe we need to change our business models and scale in a different way with the things we're creating because they are actually contributing to the problems that we have on this planet?
On behalf of all multinationals, no, it's not just a multinational thing. It's an everybody change of attitude, but it starts with literally everybody looking at what am I doing, how am I doing it, what is my eco footprint, and so a multinational will start with the things that they can impact. Take their packaging to begin with. What can I save there? How can I eliminate plastic? So let's start with eliminating plastic. Let's start with all the things that you can, and then invent new goods and services, and invent them in a way that does not erode the planet's resources at the same way that you may have been doing in the past. I know that's a generic answer, but again, I'm not here as an advocate for or a defender of the multinational company, although I did work for quite a few of them. But it is something we all need to do. I mean, everybody here in the room, if you're going to go, are you going to, sir, go on holiday soon? Are you taking a plane?
The same one you took from
Yeah, so are you going to offset the carbon footprint in some form, shape, or fashion?
We haven't decided on it yet, but we're looking at that.
Yeah, so this type of behavior is something that we all will have to somehow contribute to and pay the price for our sins of the past and proactively do what we think is right to do so. Again, this today here, we can have a whole climate change debate on various layers, but the essence of it is everybody will look into their own heart and say, how and what can I do? Because it's too easy to say, let the big multinationals solve my problem. And if you have let's say, I make it simple. Teenagers may go and demonstrate on the street and say, you guys have ruined our Earth. And then 2 minutes later, they indeed step on the plane and go on holiday and party and use plastic material or straws. And you need to be consistent into everything that we do. And it's difficult to be consistent. Very, very difficult. So we all need to be honest with ourselves that we are fallible, that there's certain things we can do and won't do, but as a planet, we better do something. And I think what you saw in what's happening this week, that slowly but surely the minds are coalescing to the point and saying, we need to solve this. The weather patterns in the last years have proven, and others, that it's time we do something. Back to my original point of why space matters to students and parents, I think space research will find, I believe, fundamentally in the ingenuity of people, particularly when it comes to our own survival of the species. We have a very, very powerful incentive to solve this. Because if Stephen Hawking, back to the picture I showed, is right, we have 400 years. It will not be any more in my lifetime. That sounds egoistic. You know, I've maybe another good 30, maybe 40 years on this, and that's it. But that would be egocentric. It's people in 2100, 200, 300 that need to live and enjoy this planet. But I do believe, sir, that in their world, it will be an interstellar world. It will not be just this planet. There will be more. And by discovery, the process of discovery of others, will we hopefully have the intelligence to make this place a better one. Other questions? Or, yes, sir.
What do you think is a realistic time frame for significant presence, let's say, in Mars and then onto interstellar? I mean, I'm not talking full colonization, but having something where there's a presence there and that can be used as a boundary to deeper exploration.
It's a discussion. Again, I'm not an astronaut in the pure sense. I think, by the way, they should not use the name astronaut for people that are just going up and down in space once. True classic astronauts, the way they've trained for it all their life, they deserve that title. But when you talk to them and ask that question, what do you guys think? How far are we in the discovery and in the ability to live outside? Brian, it's going much faster than we think at the moment. It's getting, this is what I'm sensing, is that it's growing exponential. The amount of discovery and what's going on because of all the money and intensity and desire that is poured into this, and I'm sure it's going to go with leaps and bounds and with an occasional fatality and problems. We will be on the moon pretty soon to be there and to stay. And by the way, it has also been articulated as a policy initiative for many countries. So if we go back to the moon, it is not to just say hi to the moon, it's to be there. And a number of the key countries have said, we want to stay there. So moon will be first. There may be some other, then there is the satellites, then the things that I showed you. The ISS will become a new ISS. Other things will get to go into the sky. So that's another intermediate point. And I think the next key thing is indeed trying to get to Mars. The point is not necessarily being on Mars. It's the discovery process of going to Mars that will yield new things we don't know about. We can't even fathom. We can't even dream. Just like, again, if you go back in our lifetime, when I grew up, internet is something from the year 2000, right? If I would have told my grandmother that there would be something as internet, it would have sounded to her as if I came from Mars. So for sure, somebody here in the room, a number of you we will live things that we could never fathom. Who could imagine that the iPhone that you have today has more computing power than the entire computer center in Houston that brought Apollo to the moon? So with that exponential power and technology that comes, will yield solutions that we cannot even dream of. That is the power of space, where you allow yourself the intellectual open-mindedness, the freedom to roam, the freedom to imagine, the freedom to dream, new solutions for old problems and new solutions for new problems that will arise. So I'm very bullish of what's going to happen and really look forward to, well, I personally look forward to going into space and back, and then I can tell you how it personally feels, the overview effect. Right now I'm just dreaming about it. But in the coming decades, I think we will see extraordinary items. The picture that I just showed you of let's say the Orbital Reef from Bezos, that's amazing. And that's not science fiction, that's science reality. So think about the pictures that will be released very soon. Who could have pictured a few years ago that there's a Tesla flying around the Earth at the moment? Be bonkers. Nobody, in no cartoon have I seen a flying car like this. So we need the kids of today here in this school to think things that we say you are nuts. But some of what your wild ideas will actually happen. Please.
I like the point that you made about not thinking it as an or, but an and. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've learned is about companies like Planet, for example, using agricultural data from space and being able to solve the poverty issues.
Yes.
My question to you is that, do you have any other examples of such and solutions already coming out, or what you think will be happening?
Well, for example, look at it's a known example. Look at broadband technology, and look at what the satellites are doing. The Starlink for Musk, Apple is starting to launch its own satelliting. So many of you here in an advanced country like Singapore, you have access to incredible broadband capabilities. There's a huge amount of areas around the world where people do not have access. And there's been a number of projects that have been developed over the last decades to allow people to have access to the promise of digital. And you couldn't, because you simply didn't have the wiring technology. So what Starlink, for example, does now with Musk's story, or what Apple's framework, there's going to be a number of competing satellite networks that, because of the good competition, will ultimately envelop the entire globe, wherever you will be. And also as the farmer in Africa next to his crop will have good quality connections. But whether that's in Africa or whether that's in the middle of the, trust me, there's big parts of the United States that have zero broadband access. I'm sure here in Asia there's a number of areas where your connectivity, and if you don't have the right connectivity, your good applications and whatever else that may help you with your crop, with the weather forecast, with this and that, if you don't have the right data, you make the wrong decision. So this is an example. There's two things of the ant. The reusability of rockets has created the satellite cost to drop substantially. So you see how Moore's law starts to apply. By the fact that it used to cost billions and billions to put a rocket in the air and then come back and everything crashes, right? And you have to do it all again, waste. The reusability of the rockets has ensured that the cost of launching becomes substantially lower and is getting lower and lower, number one. Number two is that with nanotechnology and everything else, all the satellites, the same power and micro power technology, instead of sending in space massive big things, you can send very small things with incredible power. And many of those at a low cost. So that results then in providing the right service and ensure that the discussion of but people should be not put space research and give that same dollar to the farmer in Africa to put a stereotype. It's wrong. We should do that there and ensure that that farmer has broadband technology in a cheap form. So it's possible to do end-to-end, absolutely. Any final question? Any final thought?
Hi, Chris. I guess on behalf of the students here in this room and the many that are online across the region, would you have any advice for them at this point in their lives?
Well, when I was asked as the CMO of InBev and AB InBev at the time, in your career, what would you advise? The one thing I always advise people is to leave your comfort zone. Because great learning happens when you leave your comfort zone. Usually that meant, again, I come from originally from a small country, Belgium, nice country, and it's good to live there. But if it's great to live and you never get out of it, you don't know how good it is and you don't learn anything new. So my advice to most people is go and live international, go and discover the planet, and you'll discover your own country. Similarly, I would now say to anybody that is listening, leave your comfort zone is not anymore leaving the comfort zone on this planet. Leave the planet, if you can. So think and act galactic, and with that I wish you good luck, and we'll see each other for a beer in space. Have a good evening.